Welcome to the second of three long-range facility plans open houses. My name is Stephen Sparks. I'm the Executive Administrator for Long-Range Planning. Our panelists will introduce themselves in a moment when we get to them. We have a lot of materials to share with you today, and we hope that you'll find it interesting and will help stimulate a robust discussion with our panel today. Before we get started, I want to review with you our meeting expectations that we have for everyone in the meeting. Those expectations are, we assume best intentions. We all want the best for all of our students. We listen intently to understand better. We are open to considering new ideas. There are no bad questions. Our interactions will be done with respect, and we will respect opposing viewpoints. There are many issues facing the Beaverton School District at this time, not the least of which is the return to school of our students and staff. Today, we are discussing the district's future facility needs. This meeting is not the time to discuss other important matters before the district. We request that today you keep your comments and questions focused on the materials that we're going to be presenting you today. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Leroy Landers, and he will give you an overview of our meeting today, and we'll lead you through our slides for this open house. So thank you. Mr. Landers, take it away.
Great, thank you, Steve. Well, first I'd like to welcome all of you to the presentation this afternoon, and thank you ahead of time for attending. We, the entire planning team, realize that you have many different things that you could be doing right now, some of which you would rather be doing. But I would like to assure you that participation in this effort is very, very important for the students of your community and for the betterment of learning in your community. So thank you very much for that. To reiterate what Steve said, this is really a conversation and presentation associated with long-range facility planning, which means that we're going to be focusing in primarily on the district's buildings and their sites, and really trying to understand how they might better serve your students and community and support learning in that community. So with that, why don't we just dive right in? Next slide, please. So this afternoon, we'll open with sort of a brief introduction of team members and what we've been doing over the last few months. We have a couple of slides trying to outline at a very high level what you'll see the initials LRFP regularly here. That means long range facility plan, what a long range facility plan is. We would like to touch on the district-wide sort of strategic goals for education in the community, because anything that we discuss related to facilities should really be viewed in the idea of supporting those key strategic goals. And also we'll touch on a brief bond history, specifically the most recent bond and how that was used to improve facilities such that they better support learning in your community. We'll then dive into one of the key sections, which is really giving you a high-level understanding of district need, specifically as it relates to facilities. And there are three categories that we'll be referencing at that time. At the end of that section, the needs section, we'll have about a 10-minute or so period of time where you'll be able to answer questions or ask questions of us. We'll do our best to answer them. Or if you want to have any other sort of discussion, whether it be between other attendees or the panelists. So with regard to that, I would ask you to hold your questions until we have that break right after the need section. Once we've had answered your questions associated with need, we'll do a presentation on the plan proposals themselves. So you'll be seeing a couple of proposals this afternoon that have been developed by the district with the intent of addressing some of the need items that you will have seen. And following the plan proposal presentation, we will have two kind of key input components, the first of which will be about a 15 or 20-minute discussion, and I'll give you instructions on how you'll be able to participate in the discussion at that time. And that will be followed by a very short 6-question survey or poll that we'll be leading you through. Next slide, please. So our key goals for this afternoon are firstly to provide to you an understanding of the district's facility related goals and the different types of need that have been identified in the district. Our second goal is to present to you the long-range plan options and the rationale behind why those options are being proposed to you this afternoon. And the third objective, which is really our key objective today, is to hear your feedback regarding district need and also the plan options. And what I can share with you is that your suggestions or your opinions or observations will be very carefully weighed by the district, and wherever appropriate will be incorporated into plan evolution and development as this moves forward. Next slide, please. So the planning team, my name is Leroy Landers. I'm a principal at Malum Architects. We have offices in Portland and Seattle, and with me here today is Jennifer Lubin, senior planner at Malum Architects. We are joined by Frank Angelo, who is a senior planner at Angelo Planning Group. And we have been working together with a key district leadership team over the last few months, actually, to not only understand facility need, but also to develop the two plan options that you're going to see this afternoon. So with us here today, representing that district team, are Steve Sparks, Josh Gamez, Aaron Boyle, and Robert McCracken. And as a total team, we working together, we have also been meeting several different times with a 12-member focus group that is comprised primarily of community members and also some representation from local jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So as we're moving through this presentation, we wanted to sort of let you know right up front that you should keep these things in mind. We are still in process of developing the plan. What you're seeing today is by no means sort of a baked cake in any way. This is really the first time that we're bringing out to the community the plan options to receive input. We also wanted to let you know, well, first of all, feel free to ask any question you would like regarding the long-range facility plan, but we can't guarantee that we'll be able to answer every one of your questions. We'll do the best we can, given the knowledge that we have, and in the event we can't answer a question, we'll go back and research it and then try to get back to you if we can after this presentation. As I mentioned before, our primary interest is to hear from you. We want to hear your reaction, your ideas, your thoughts around not only the types of need that have been identified, but also the plan proposals themselves, and that we're going to give you time for questions and comments at two very distinct points in the presentation. And your feedback will really become part of a long-range facility plan report that will be submitted to the superintendent. And the superintendent will then take that information, put it under consideration, and then make a recommendation to the school board. And that could ultimately result in a subsequent capital measure being proposed to the broader Beaverton community. What we're talking about today, the different potential types of projects, are not meant in any way to be a promise at this time. There hasn't been a capital measure passed. And so really what we're really talking about is some possible ideas for the long-range facility plan, again, to receive your input. Next slide, please. Frank, would you like to take this, or would you like me to take it?
I've got it. Thank you, Leroy. I'm Frank Angelo with Angelo Planning Group, and it's my pleasure to work with Malum, the folks from Malum and the school district on this long-range facility plan. What I'd like to do is take a brief moment to give an overview on what a long-range facility plan is, what some of the elements, key elements are, and some of the outcomes of the long-range facility planning process are. The long-range facility plan itself is really an opportunity for the school district to step back, take a look at and assess their educational programming in light of their district's facilities, and that's they evaluating the educational program from the perspective of the condition of the facilities, looking at enrollment trends, growth into the future, and identifying what facility needs will be needed over the next 10 years to accommodate the students and the resources of the district. The plan itself is a 10-year plan, and its primary objective is to support the education and success for all district students. There is an Oregon statute that does guide and direct school districts throughout the state of Oregon to prepare long-range facility plans. This planning process is being done under that umbrella. The district has prepared previously long-range facility plans in 2002 and 2010. So the district is now beyond the 10-year horizon of the 2010 long-range facility plan that was adopted back then. Those two earlier long-range facility plans, the 2002 and 2010 programs, led to some bond proposals that were presented to the district voters and approved by district voters following the adoption of the facility plans themselves. The long-range facility plan includes a number of elements. The state statute, ORS 195-110, prescribes a number of elements that need to be a part of a long-range facility plan, and these include looking at student enrollment growth, facility condition, capital improvement needs over a 10-year period, identifying if there are opportunities to use existing sites more efficiently, and discussing financing options that are available for capital programs in the district. Next slide, please, Jennifer. So, next slide, I'm sorry. That was the slide I was working off of. One more slide. Why now? So it's a good question. We've been doing this work for the last 6 months or so. The pandemic has obviously had an effect on the school district, but from a long-range planning perspective, it's an appropriate time to take a look at long-range facility needs in the district. Again, this is a 10-year plan that's required by the state, and the requirement is for the districts to prepare the plan to be eligible for certain funding opportunities for capital projects through state funding. At the same time, the district facilities are continuing to grow in age, and maintenance needs continue and have not stopped over the past year. So the district has a number of needs that need to be addressed. It's an opportunity to identify efficiencies in the district, to see if the facilities and use of property can be used more efficiently. As well, this is an opportunity now to add an equity lens to facility planning, looking at equity between schools at all grade levels. And then finally, it's an opportunity to develop a 10-year plan that looks to potential new capital programs as current bonds are paid back and expire. Next slide, please. The long-range facility plan really has three components, as I mentioned earlier: the educational program, enrollment and capacity, and facility condition. The educational program consists of a number of elements, including the education specifications, which describe the district's ideal size for elementary middle and high schools. It also discusses the educational programming element, looks at programs such as kindergarten, PE, STEM, special ed within the context of facility needs. And then we are bringing in technology. Technology is obviously ever expanding, and how technology relates to facility needs and the learning environment is a real important element of the long-range facility plan. On enrollment capacity, Portland State University prepares annually forecasts for school districts throughout the state. Beaverton School District gets an annual 10-year forecast, so the district knows by grade level how many students they can expect to have over the course of the 10-year period. And that's accounted for and assessed as a part of the planning process in terms of what facilities are needed to accommodate enrollment and how much capacity is needed. Facility condition, the district just completed last year a very major update of a facility condition assessment inventory. So there's a great deal of current information on the conditions of all the facilities, including schools, as well as accessory facilities like the transportation center, the administration building, and food services. So the district has a good understanding of maintenance needs and for facilities throughout the district. Next slide, please. So when these three components are assembled in the plan, we end up with the long-range facility plan. This is the plan that will go, as Leroy mentioned, from the superintendent to the school board for consideration and adoption. Following that, the plan is also presented and incorporated into the local comprehensive plans of the cities that comprise the district, Washington County and the city of Beaverton. So the city of Beaverton and Washington County both have adopted and included the 2010 plan as a part of their comprehensive plan. When this plan is done, that will be updated by both of those jurisdictions. And then final slide, please. The other outcome is a balancing and identification of priority needs over the 10-year period, and balancing the needs with the funding opportunities. And the needs, as we will go through in this presentation today, include additions to schools, renovation, newer replacement schools, other support facilities, and balancing those with the anticipated revenue that would be available over the course of the 10-year period. So with that, that's a quick overview of what is included in a long-range facility plan and how the facility plan is used. So I'll turn it back to Leroy.
Thank you, Frank. The next thing we'd like to share with you is really a very high-level overview of the key district strategic goals for education, just so that we can remember how those would relate to any decision-making associated with facilities or improvement of facilities. Next slide, please. So as many of you probably know already, the district has some real 4 key pillars around which they strategically are approaching educational delivery in your community. The first of these is the expectation of excellence. The second of these involves innovation. The third of these is embracing equity throughout the community. And the fourth is involving collaboration. And again, all of these are points that are really touchstones against which any plan that is developed by the district and any input you might provide as community members should really refer back to from the standpoint of quality of education. Next slide, please. The district has also developed some key guiding principles that will further inform development of the long-range plan. These guiding principles are directly tied to the 4 pillars, strategic pillars. We expect excellence is really the idea that they would like to strategically plan for the maintenance, modernization, and replacement of facilities. They want to make sure that they are able to meet all state regulatory requirements. They feel that it is important that the community and the district maintain the investment that has already been made in district facilities so that they don't further degrade. that as you are considering the management of facilities, to consider whether it makes better sense to, in some instances, replace a facility rather than modernize it, depending on the cost associated with the modernization and the most efficient and effective use of public resources. And then provide for additions and any expansion needs as they would relate to growth of enrollment within the district. Under innovation, recognition that there are evolving needs both educationally and otherwise within the district, and making sure that the facilities are able to support those needs, providing flexibility with school facilities, incorporating sustainability and energy efficiency into the consideration. Under embracing equity, there's the strong commitment that every decision made should be viewed through an equity lens, and that the plan should be working toward creating parity across district facilities for the entire community. And as part of that, to really plan very carefully for where you are making any upgrades and improvements. And finally, under collaboration, collaborate as you develop the plan for future facility needs. And this evening's meeting is really evidence of that desire for collaboration with the community. And then where appropriate, provide community amenities as part of the plan. Next slide, please. So touching briefly on the equity lens, I mentioned the district is fully committed to viewing this plan and any decisions that are associated with it through a lens of equity. This includes things asking questions as we start to make decisions on whose voice is and is not represented in any given decision. Who does the decision benefit or burden? Is the decision in alignment with Beaverton School District's equity policy? And does the decision close or widen access and opportunity and expectation gaps? Next slide, please. A couple of quick slides on bond history to put this effort in a broader perspective. The first of these is really asking the question, why do we even need bond measures? Really, the purpose of a bond measure is to make sure that your district's facilities are able to do the following: support your educational programs, protect your existing capital investment that's already been made by the community, and to make sure that you're also accommodating any enrollment growth that might happen. And relative to this point, really the standpoint, the viewpoint in developing a long-range facility plan is that neither the district nor the community is really designing, building, and maintaining buildings just because you like to do that. The intention of this is to very clearly understand that any discussion about modernizations or improvements to the building is really all about finding ways to make them better support education in your community. Next slide. And the way that's done is once a plan has been developed, the district goes to the community to see if that community will provide capital support or funds to make improvements to schools. And in 2014, your community graciously passed a $680 million bond that brought a lot of benefit, facility benefit, to the community. And what you're looking at are just some of the projects that were undertaken under your last bond. These happen to be the new schools that were undertaken as part of that bond. And there were numerous modernizations and improvements on other schools throughout the district above and beyond these that you see here. So the bottom line is that there was a lot of good work done with the previous bond, and that touched some of the projects in the district. And this is really positioning your community in the district to take the next step into the future of education. Next slide, please. So understanding district need, this is now kind of the first very large section where we can talk about the three primary areas or buckets, so to speak, of facility need within the district. First slide, please. The first of these areas, very purposefully so, involves educational programs. So all of the orange slides you're going to see are directly associated with the educational program area of consideration. One of the ways that we evaluate educational adequacy of a given facility is to make comparisons of the gross square footage per student available at that facility relative to certain other benchmarks, those both national benchmarks, but perhaps more importantly, the district's own benchmarks that has been established for a given grade level through its development of what is called an education specification. This is a document that identifies programmatically the types of spaces that should be put into a modern learning environment, and also the overall square footage or size of each of the spaces and the total square footage of the building. What you're seeing here on this chart are the different grade levels broken out. To the left, you see the list of elementary schools. Each bar represents an elementary school. And the horizontal dashed line above those bars illustrates the district's education specification square footage per student. And the blue bars that you're looking at each grade level are those schools that are very significantly under the target square footage per student that the district has established. So to be clear here, when a district, Beaverton School District, goes out and is constructing a new elementary school, they're constructing that elementary school around 122 gross square feet per student. And the blue schools are at least 20 feet or more, 20 square feet or more under that target area. Next slide, please. In addition to that sort of broad approach to measuring educational adequacy, there are a number of other projects that have been identified as potential areas of improvement supporting different programs in the district. From the square footage standpoint, the metric that we just looked at, if the district were to address every school and bring it up to their standard from a square footage per student, it's projected that the cost to do that is approximately $260 million district-wide. Now, having said that, no district, because of the broad range of ages and types of facilities that they have, no district ever endeavors to do that, certainly never in one fell swoop. They may overtake it over many, many years. But this is really just giving you an idea of the order of magnitude challenge that exists from the standpoint of that metric. Some of the specific educational programs that have been identified by the district beyond that include improvements related to special education. These improvements would involve additions at 12 elementary schools, 7 middle schools, and 3 high schools to align those schools with the district standards. It also includes the possibility of a new or perhaps a modernized standalone special education facility. And for the first grouping of schools, those additions and improvements are projected at costing approximately $100 million. And the freestanding special education facility is projected as being between $14 to $21 million, depending on the exact scope of that project. The second area of specific programmatic need identified by the district includes early childhood education. And this is specifically involving the preschool classroom and support areas that would be made to 8 elementary schools throughout the district and would provide preschool at all Title I schools. The addition or improvement of early educational facilities at of all those schools is estimated at $13.6 million. The final specific area of programmatic work involves physical education. And specifically, this is a line item that would be associated with the addition of either a gymnasium or multi-purpose rooms to 14 elementary schools, 2 middle, and 1 option school to make sure that from a physical education standpoint, facilities were able to support that activity such that it would meet the state PE requirements. And then finally, there is a possibility of also removing portable classrooms throughout the district. There are 175 portable classrooms currently existing, and the district recognizes that having those portables is not an optimal condition, both from the standpoint of having students be part of the overall school and be in the school, but also because of some of the safety considerations with moving children in and out of the schools to portables. If those portables were to be replaced, the estimated cost associated with that is $66.9 million. And what I would like to say about all of these costs here is that just really underscoring that it's not the intention to say that all of these items need to be addressed in their entirety by any plan. The only purpose here of starting to show what some of the estimated rough order of magnitude costs are is such that you would be able to understand the total amount of work and what would really be involved from a capital standpoint in order to address the various programs. Next slide, please. So the next point we'd like to touch on is the lens of equity throughout the district from the standpoint of educational programs. Again, this is a key focus for the district, and we would like to make sure that all decision making is viewed through this lens. When you look at the facilities through several different components of equity, namely free lunch, free and reduced lunch, students of color, and English language learners, the following schools really start to emerge out of the district. You see the list of these schools at the bottom of the slide, and you can also see their distribution in red or yellow dots with red circles throughout the district. And you will note that associated with previous bonds, Aloha Huber K-8, Vose Elementary School, and William Walker Elementary School have been replaced already as part of this ongoing focus and recognition of equity. And so the remaining schools that are on this list should definitely be tracked and considered with regard to any decision making related to either improvement or replacement. Next slide, please. So the takeaways of this section there are approximately 3 of them. It's important to note that there are 8 elementary schools and 2 high schools that are significantly below the target square footage that has been established by the district through their educational specifications. It's important to know that there are 3 known areas of facility improvement directly related to specific programs in the district. Those programs include preschool, special education, and physical education. And that 9 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 high school have emerged when viewed through the lens of free and reduced lunch, students of color, and English language learners. Next slide, please. Now moving on to the second key area of facility need consideration. So we're into the blue slides. One of the first things that we really look at and consider is just the age of the facility itself. This is not to say that old buildings are necessarily in bad condition or necessarily should be replaced simply due to their age, but it's very common to see that older buildings in school districts may very well be reaching the end of their expected life cycle. And this graph at each of the different grade levels identifies the age of the existing facility. The horizontal dashed line identifies a zone or approximate target that the district has generally established as an expected life cycle for a given building. I will note that depending on which district you're in, this expectation will vary. Some districts place their expectation at 60 years, others may place it at 80 years. But it's just a good hurdle against which you can look at the various buildings. At the elementary level, you will note there are 3 schools that are older than the expected life cycle. That includes McKay, Barnes, and Raleigh Hills K-8. At the high school level, there is 1 school that exceeds the expected life cycle. It is the oldest facility in the district, which is Beaverton High School. And the options schools, Terra Nova also exceeds the 75-year expected life cycle. Next slide, please. As Frank mentioned, over the last year, the school district had commissioned a very highly detailed facility condition assessment. And coming out of that, there was a tremendous amount of detailed information for each of the individual sites at the district. This boils down into kind of 2 general areas of data. The first of them is identifying specific areas for improvement and the costs associated with them in line item for each site. The second is really an overall score called the Facility Condition Index. This score is represented in this slide and is typically used as a very quick way to compare the relative condition of all of your schools across the district. In this bar chart, the higher the score, the worse condition the particular facility is in. And after they reach a certain level, a certain benchmark level, which is indicated by the dashed line, horizontal dash line on this chart, those buildings which exceed this are buildings which might be considered for replacement rather than modernization due to their condition. And you see 7 facilities that reach this level at the elementary level. This includes West Tualatin View, Cooper Mountain, Fir Grove, Beaver Acres, Raleigh Park, Cedar Mill, and Raleigh Hills K-8. Raleigh Hills K-8, you'll notice, is far and above the worst condition of all the elementary schools. At the middle level, Whitford just starts to broach this hurdle point and should be considered. And at the high school level, Beaverton High School, which isn't particularly surprising in that it's your oldest facility district-wide, also falls into potential for replacement. Options include Terra Nova and ISB, both of which are in the consider replacement area, and 2 transportation facilities, Allen and South Transportation, fall into this category. Next slide, please. We also take a look at the seismic condition of facilities. The gray horizontal zone on this chart illustrates the district-wide goal for the seismic condition of each facilities. In this bar chart, the higher the bars are, the better condition the facility is from the standpoint of seismic. So you will note that your newer schools, no surprise, William Walker, Sato, and Vose are all very high scores and exceed the district goal. Very importantly, it's important to note the blue bars in this particular chart. These blue bars fall below the lowest level of seismic condition, which is less than a collapse prevention. The schools at the elementary level that fall into this category are Raleigh Hills K-8, Fir Grove, McKay, and Raleigh Park. At the middle level, Mountain View, Cedar Park, Highland Park, and Whitford. High school level, Beaverton High School, again, not surprising based on its age, and the option school, ISB. Next slide, please. We wanted to show a quick glimpse at some of the numbers that were developed, kind of emerging from this facility condition assessment completed the last year by a third-party consultant. You can see some of the numbers associated with each site, but really the purpose of this slide is to give you an overall sense of what the total projected cost would be to address deficiencies, facility-related deficiencies district-wide. And the number associated with that total cost to address these deficiencies is approximately $610 million, including addressing seismic deficiencies. So these include reparations or modernizations that involve structural, mechanical, and electrical systems. It involves the exterior enclosure of the building, so the walls and the roofs, and also interior finishes. Commercial equipment, so kitchen equipment, would fall under each of these line items, as would fire and life safety systems and any site work that would need to be done, repair of sidewalks, parking, and so forth. Next slide, please. We also wanted to bring out and illustrate the point related to sustainability and the metric of energy use intensity, or EUI. And what this chart shows are really where your best opportunities lie from the standpoint of a return on investment. So the higher the bar in this chart, the more opportunity for improvement exists at a given site. So the schools with the greatest opportunity for energy improvement and efficiency at the elementary level include Raleigh Hills K-8, McKay, McKinley, Cedar Mill, Shoals Heights, Montclair, and Cooper Mountain. At the middle school level, Mountain View, Five Oaks, and at the high school, Beaverton High School, Terra Nova options, and a number of different facilities, 3 transportation facilities, maintenance, and an admin building under support. So for every dollar you would spend in improving these associated with energy efficiency, you will get the highest return. Next slide, please. So the takeaways for facility condition is, when viewed through the metrics of age, facility condition, which is the FCI score, the seismic condition of the building, and energy use, 2 schools consistently fall into the worst category in all 4 areas. Those 2 schools are Raleigh Hills K-8 and Beaverton High School. 4 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 1 high school and alternative school fall into the worst seismic category, which is below collapse prevention. And that would include the above schools of Raleigh Hills K-8 and Beaverton High School. And the district-wide deferred maintenance is estimated at $610 million. Next slide, please. The final category for need is enrollment and capacity. As Steve mentioned earlier, the Center for Population Research at Portland State University provides enrollment projections, 10-year enrollment projections. Those projections are district-wide and also on an individual site-by-site basis. Next slide, please. When we look at those geographically on a map, there are a couple of important points to note and remember. You're looking at a map of each of the grade levels here, and these maps represent the percentage of growth or decline, so enrollment growth or decline within the district. Starting on the left at the elementary level, enrollment is projected to reduce by approximately 6%. So you are expected to have, over the next 10 years, about 1,000 less students district-wide. But having said that, there are a couple of boundary areas that are expected to have quite significant growth. Those are the Sato boundary and also the Hazeldale boundary. Sato at 26.9% projected growth, and Hazeldale at 38.7% projected growth. At the middle school, you're projected to have a 3% enrollment reduction district-wide, or 230 less students. Only one boundary area is projected to have growth at about 5%, which is Whitford. All of the other areas are projected to decline. And at the high school level, you are projected to have a 5.9% enrollment reduction, or 634 less students district-wide over the next 10 years. However, Westview is projected to have a growth of 8.3%, and Mountainside is projected to have a growth of slightly over 3%. Next slide. What we then do is we take that information associated with enrollment over the next 10 years, and we compare that against existing capacities at each boundary level, which really gives us a sense of how well each site is being utilized, or in some cases overutilized. There are a couple of important takeaways here, looking at the elementary map to start. District-wide, you are projected to have permanent capacity of 12%, almost 13% remaining. So you have excess capacity district-wide. That's 2,500 available seats district-wide at the elementary level. However, there are several boundary levels, Bonnie Slope and Sato, which are projected to be over-enrolled. So Sato at 174 students being over-enrolled, and Bonnie Slope at 126 students being over-enrolled based on existing capacity. At the middle school level, you're projected to have 3.1% capacity remaining district-wide. So you see all of the blue areas there, or 240 seats. But having said that, one of the schools is projected as being significantly over-enrolled, which is Stoller, at 537 students over-enrolled for the middle school. At the high school level, a projection of 14.7% capacity remaining, or approximately 1,700 available seats district-wide. However, Westview is projected to be over-enrolled by approximately 588 students. Next slide. So our takeaways for this area of consideration is that there is adequate district-wide capacity at every grade level. However, there are two elementary schools that are projected to be more than 100 students over capacity, Sato and Bonnie Slope. There is one middle school that is projected to be significantly over at 500 students over capacity, that's Stoller Middle School. And one high school is projected to be almost 600 students over capacity, which is Westview High School. Next slide. So with that, that ends our presentation relative to district need. Granted, it's a very high level overview and summary given the amount of time we have, but now we'd like to leave about 10 minutes or so for any questions you might have. The way we'd like to do this is you will note at the bottom of your screens a hand icon. Our kind of preferred method would be for you to click on the hand icon, and then we will unmute your microphone so you'll be able to ask a question. And then after you've asked the question, we'll remute your microphone. You can also type in questions in the chat, although it's a little bit more difficult for us to track that. And it doesn't have the benefit of all of the other attendees being able to hear your question. So with that, we have one hand raised. Mary, would you like to ask your question once you've been unmuted? Okay.
Am I good?
You are good.
So one of the key elements is education specifications, which includes size of schools. I know this is a question you guys aren't really going to want to address, but it comes up every time during boundary adjustments, and it's the feeder system. You have a feeder system that will never work because the size of schools do not allow a clean break between each of the schools. At what point is the school district going to look at the ideal school size as being broken? and being contrary to creating a clean feeder system that we all want for our children.
Steve, would you like to
Yeah,
address
so
that?
let me try and respond to that. Mary, thank you for your question. I did receive your email, asking generally the same question. We're not able to. I'm not able to answer that question for you here right now in a satisfactory way. We have the educational specifications that were approved prior to the 2014 bond. And it would require a broader conversation with our teaching and learning department and their leaderships leaders in understanding how the ed specifications are working at each of the schools. If we come to find that the specifications are, not working, then we would go and do that amendment. As a part of this process, we are working with our teaching and learning partners. We have not heard from them that the ed specs are not appropriate, but this is a question we can certainly ask in a much more direct way.
It is just really a basic math question that doesn't work. And I think it should be pushed to the other department that looks at those numbers.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, all of the ed spec, as you've noted, and a number of factors, including emphasis or initiatives associated with specific educational programs within the ed spec, all of those play a very significant role in development of the long-range plan. And of course, all of those are in kind of continual evolution, so to speak. And as Steve mentioned, the development of the ed spec as a basic criteria is outside of this group. We're sort of tasked to use it as a metric that's given to us. But yeah, it's a very good point. Any other questions? Any that people would like to raise their hand about any need? Did it all make sense? And do you have additional areas of need that you would like to bring to our attention? Okay. Not seeing any. We can move on to the next section then.
Yeah. Leroy, there are no questions in the chat, so
okay.
Please proceed.
Okay. So let's move on to the next section, which is the plan proposal section. So as I mentioned before, we will be sharing with you two different plan options that have been developed by the district. And again, these are plan options, meaning capital plan options, because the state requires, among many different factors in the development of a long-range plan, the development of a 10-year capital plan. And the intent of that 10-year capital plan is to address needs that have been identified as they relate to facilities or deficiencies associated with facilities that would, if improved, make them better supporting of education within the district. The first plan option is directly aligned with the idea of no tax rate increase. So this would maintain the current tax rate. And some of you are probably asking yourselves, how is that achieved and how could that happen? The way it's achieved is that, as you know, district debt is amortized over time, and some of that debt is going to be sunsetting. So it will be falling off of the district books. which allows the opportunity to sort of refill the bucket, so to speak, and just simply maintain your current tax rate. This is a strategy that is very common and allows school districts to periodically, whether it be every 6 years or 8 years or 10 years, look at potentially putting forth a capital measure to address district need. In this case, the no tax rate increase is projected at yielding approximately $325 million that could be used to address different facility need district-wide. And the expectation is that that $325 million would be spent on school facilities over a 4-year period of time. The second plan option that you're going to see today looks at a 25 cents tax rate increase per $1,000 of assessed value. And this bond amount is projected, it's yielding a bond of approximately $725 million that would be spent over a 7-year bond program. I would note that the 25-cent tax rate increase and its yield are really an attempt to look at if you would more or less duplicate the amount of bond money that was approved in the previous measure in 2014. That's really how this second option was really built around. That's what it's built around. And to give you a sense of what the impact might be, just in one particular instance, for a community member that might have a home that is assessed, so not market value, but assessed value, which is typically less than market value. A home that's assessed at, say, $400,000, that would equate to a roughly $8.33 or so increase per month in taxes for this. Next slide, please. So here you see, compared side by side, the two plan options, plan option 1 on the left and plan option 2 on the right. And they are broken into the various components of need that we've just been looking at. So plan option 1 and plan option 2 both propose expenditure toward special education improvements at several facilities across the district. You'll note, as we mentioned, that so that you have reference of what the total amount of special ed need is that this proposal, both proposals, only address part of the need that's identified in this area. The next area is pre-kindergarten or pre-K modifications. Option 1 allocates $1 million toward those modifications for certain facilities, and option 2 allocates the same amount, which is only a small portion that was identified of the total need in this area district-wide. The larger plan, option 2, goes a bit further with educational program, providing capital for outdoor learning improvements, and also the PE program area that was mentioned and identified in the earlier need for $8 million. Under facility condition, really falls into two categories that are being considered. One of those categories is replacement of facilities, and the other is modernization of existing facilities. Under replacement, the first option, the $325 million option, proposes replacing Raleigh Hills K-8 with an elementary school, and you see that that is proposed in both plan options, the $325 and the $723 million approach. And you'll probably note that, or remember that that was one of the worst schools across the board in the district. The second school that is being proposed for replacement is Beaverton High School. In plan option 1, at $20 million, that's really only covering the planning and design and preparation for replacement of that school. In plan option 2, with the increase that is allocated, that would provide for the actual replacement of the high school, the construction replacement of that high school. The third line item under facility replacement is a study associated with another elementary school in the district, and $3 million has been allocated for that in the larger bond proposal. And then in both proposals, option 1 and 2, replacement of one of the transportation facilities. Under modernization, for deferred maintenance, option number 1 allocates $110 million, and option number 2 increases that modestly to $140 million. Under school modernizations, option 1 allocates 10, and option 2 raises that to 30 million. And both seismic and security upgrades are provided by both, and you can see the order of magnitude increase in those provided between options 1 and options 2. It's a little bit more than doubling the amount of capital applied to those areas. Capacity enrollment, classroom additions are provided in both of the plan options. And then under other support line items, including technology, school office relocation, bus replacement, and equipment replacement, there are allocations for each, but again, because of the difference in plan option proposed, technology is approximately twice as much as in the lower option. And all of the rest of the line items are more or less in alignment. Next slide, please. So taking a look at exactly what is trying to be achieved by these proposals and the capital being allocated to them, and why certain schools have been selected as being included in plan options. We have 2 or 3 slides that try and outline that in a brief summary. So from special education improvements, the objective there is really to adapt some of your existing special ed spaces to be more suitable for their current use and to better support the needs of these students. So this will not cover everything district-wide again, but it's really looking at the worst conditions associated with special ed and trying to address those programs. For pre-kindergarten modifications, the objective is really to upgrade existing pre-kindergarten spaces to meet the specific needs of those young learners, which would make sure that we're providing a more inclusive and sort of supporting inclusive and current learning practices, and really providing appropriate material and furniture for kids of that age and size. Outdoor learning improvements, the allocation for that is really about expanding outdoor covered play areas at elementary schools across the district. And then physical education or athletic additions, the intention is to build a new gym at Stoller Middle School and Barnes Elementary School, and provide various other improvements to other district athletic facilities. Again, the allocation in view of trying to keep the capital plans reasonable and realistic will only address partial district need in the physical education area. Next slide. From the standpoint of facility replacement and why various schools have been identified, if we take a look at Raleigh Hills Elementary School to start, and if you look at the right-hand portion of this slide, as a reminder, you'll see the facility condition related charts that you saw earlier. And the important thing to recognize here is that in all of the 3 charts that we're showing, which include the facility condition index or FCI rating, the facility age, and also the seismic condition, Raleigh Hills Elementary consistently scores in the worst category of each of these. So worst FCI score in the district, one of the oldest facilities, and one of 4 elementary schools with the lowest seismic rating, which is below collapse prevention. It also fell into a category of the highest opportunity for energy improvements. So by replacing this school, you will be getting the highest return on your investment related to energy improvement. From an equity standpoint, more than 45% of its students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And from a site utilization standpoint, the existing school capacity is 250 students below the district target of 750. So replacing this school at the target capacity will provide a better utilization of district properties. Important to note, this school was previously identified in the earlier plan, the most recent long-range facility plan. And so this is really the next logical step from the standpoint of planning to take the good thinking that was done in the previous plan and begin to implement it and move it forward in this plan update. And in replacement of the school, you'll be eliminating approximately $12 million of deferred maintenance needs that has been identified. Next slide, please. Beaverton High School. Why is Beaverton High School showing up as a possible replacement? Again, when looking at the charts, including facility condition, facility age, and seismic condition, Beaverton High School is one of the worst FCI scores in the district, putting it in a kind of critical level. It's also, at least large portions of it, are the oldest facility in the district, being 105 years old. It is the only high school in the district that has a seismic rating below collapse prevention. It also provides the greatest opportunity. It falls into the zone of greatest opportunity for return on investment from the standpoint of energy improvement. And 51% of its students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And the replacement of Beaverton High School would take approximately $53 million of deferred maintenance off of the books. So that's a pretty significant bite into the overall deferred maintenance need district-wide. Next slide, please. Why one of your transportation facilities, and specifically the Allen Street Transportation Facility? Allen Street is one of the worst FCI scores in the district. You can see it moves into the critical level. It is an existing facility that is more than 50 years old. Certainly there are older facilities in the district, but some of the key reasons for considering replacement of this facility involve operations and specifically safety. The repair bays in this transportation facility are very small and they don't really provide adequate space for technical repair equipment. A third of the floor lifts in the facility are unusable, have failed, difficult to replace parts, and they lack safety stops to prevent unplanned retraction, which is really having a pretty significant impact on technicians' ability to make needed repairs in an efficient fashion. Next slide, please. From the standpoint of modernization, capacity, and enrollment, so now we've moved away from replacement, but looking at modernization of existing facilities. The deferred maintenance line item that has been identified in each of the plants is really intended to repair and upgrade projects at all facilities throughout the district. With exception of the brand new schools, which of course have little to no deferred maintenance because they're brand new. From the standpoint of school modernizations, the intent is to provide capital to modernize schools to improve the learning environment, which will enhance student engagement and also improve the health and behavior of students as it relates to the quality of their learning environment. The seismic upgrade line items intention is to provide seismic upgrades to district facilities that are in the worst performing category. And that would include all of the blue bars that you saw, with the exception of any school that where it is anticipation of replacement has been made. So any school that will not be replaced will have seismic upgrades associated with it. Security upgrades will include cameras, fencing, and access control upgrades at various schools throughout the district. The line item associated with nutrition service upgrades will provide for various projects throughout the district, including electrical upgrades, needed equipment replacement, and so forth at kitchens. And then the classroom addition line item, which is provided in both plans, will add additional classrooms at Sato, Oak Hills Elementary, and Stoller. Those are the schools where significant over-enrollment has been projected in the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So again, before we get into the question and answer, a very quick sort of overview, which we can come back to this slide if any of your questions would like to make cross comparison between the two plan options. So I'll give you just sort of a moment or two to refresh your memory regarding the line items and the allocations that have been proposed. And let's move to the next slide. So with that, we would like to open up about maybe a 20-minute or so time for discussion or questions. And again, the preferred approach, if you have any questions, whether it be about need or about the individual plans, or if you don't have a question but a comment, that would be very useful for us to hear and to take note of. Please raise your hand, which would be at the bottom of the screen. I'm seeing Steve raise his hand.
Thank you, Leroy. So I just wanted to share a couple of questions, comments that have come across the chat while you were speaking. The questions have been sent to the panelists, and I think it would be useful for everybody to hear them, plus the responses. So Ms. Pinker has asked, what about creating more option schools and learning choices? As for today, the chance of getting into option school is very low. And my response to her was that option school programs are considered and developed by the district's teaching and learning department. We have not heard of any new programs for option programs being developed by teaching and learning, which is the reason why we don't have that identified under the educational programming part of the plan. So that's
I can add to that
question.
too, Steve.
Okay, please do.
So I would add that a lot of the focus over the past few years has been actually to add options types programs within the comprehensive high schools. So think like CTE programs. It increases the opportunity for students to participate in those programs when they are located within the comprehensive high schools. It makes it more accessible. And those projects also, we've been to quite a few of them, and they're funded through the Measure 98 funds. And so that's also why that's not really reflected in the bottom plan.
So Aaron, you were breaking up a little bit on the end there, but I think your point was well taken. We also, from Ms. Manso, asked a couple of questions about capacity. So is additional capacity needed at Raleigh Hills Elementary? Won't this just create additional capacity that developers will use as an excuse to allow additional residential development in areas without capacity? And she also asked, will the replacement of Beaverton High School include replacement of the recently constructed buildings on the Beaverton High School site? So let me tackle the Raleigh Hills question first. And I invite Josh Gamez and Aaron Boyle to chime in if I miss anything here. In the 2014 bond, we had identified improvements to the Raleigh Hills school to remove portables and create classrooms for science and other general ed classrooms in that school. When we were looking at it very carefully in the design and development phase, we came to the conclusion that Raleigh Hills just needed to be replaced. It is an old building with a lot of issues with it, as you saw in the materials presented here this afternoon. So while the replacement will create additional capacity at the Raleigh Hills school site, the intention is not to, facilitate more development in the area. The area doesn't have large vacant lots unless you look at like the Portland Country Club and further down Shoals Ferry Road, the City of Portland owned Redtail Golf Course. So in terms of, an increase of development in there, I don't see anything going on other than what's been happening, which is the periodic infill type developments out there. In terms of the replacement of Beaverton High School, we are very conscious of the investments that have been made at the site. For example, in 2002, the new cafeteria was constructed. All our preliminary design ideas retain that building. It doesn't make sense to demolish it to put in a new building there. I know that there is investment being made by the Alumni Association, and we're very conscious of that as well. So for example, one new building is the concession stand and restrooms over by the track and football field, and our design intention is to not impact that at all. So I invite Josh and Aaron to add on if I've left anything out.
Steve, you covered it well. Thank you.
Okay. So Leroy, I turn it back over to you, and if there are any hands raised.
And again, we welcome any comments along with questions that you might have. There must be something wrong with these plans. Okay, not seeing any hands. Then, oh, here we go. Good. We have a hand. Michelle, please. Where we go. Great.
A question about those maps that showed where the population growth is going to occur.
Can we go back to that map, Jennifer, please? There we go.
I thought it was interesting that the middle school, and maybe I'm just not thinking about this right. How is that middle school in a different area going to end up overcrowded? We know that the northwest and southwest corners are growing. So the high school and the elementary makes sense to me. I'm confused what's happening in that middle school. Is it just there's like a cluster of kids who are going to age into middle school all at one time? I'm a little confused by this map. How is just Whitford getting overcrowded in that time period?
Yeah, I would say that I could not comment on the individual, factors that have created that condition. What we have done is we've taken the Portland State University information coming from the Center for Population Research, and in certain areas kind of adjusted it a little bit, although not in this area, I don't think, adjusted it a little bit for other known factors, and essentially use that to develop these maps. And I don't know what phenomena is actually causing that occurrence at Whitford. I don't know if any of the district staff would be able to provide input on that or not.
Yeah, I don't have the tables with me at the moment, but my guess is that this is reflecting some of the additions we made to Whitford during the boundary adjustment. And yeah, it's possible that there's, just a cohort in there that's moved its way through. It's not a huge overage.
Right.
And Whitford's not a terribly big school either. So it's, I would have to look at that to find out exactly what the difference was.
Can we go to the next slide that looks at capacity versus enrollment, Jennifer? There we go. Oops. Yeah. Yeah. So what I wanted to just go back and look at is, while that particular middle school is projected to grow by roughly 5%, it's clearly growing within its capacity, because if it weren't, it would be glowing pink or red at us right now. So while I don't know the answer to your question in terms of the justification behind that increase, it appears that that increase won't cause a problem in the next 10 years. You'll still be slightly under enrolled at that school.
I'd also observe at the middle school map here on this slide, Meadow Park is that pink color. Please note that when these maps were prepared, our recommendation for the middle school boundary adjustment hadn't been finalized. And the where you see adjustment in process in parens, the word adjustment is generally the Aloha Huber attendance area, which is now going to be feeding the Mountain View attendance area. So the pink color will turn blue for Mountain View, and for Mountain View, it'll probably change to a lighter blue.
Okay. Thank you. Can I ask one more question?
Absolutely, please do.
It seems like the target enrollment for the schools at the different levels is quite a bit off from what the capacity of the buildings are. I mean, I get that there is like some ideal number of students per building, but it also seems very far off from where we're starting, and I'm wondering how we're going to get there without major changes to many buildings.
Well, I think over time, and that's just part of the, if I'm understanding the question correctly, and I'm going to kind of restate it a little bit to make sure that I am understanding it first. The target enrollment, just to pick one example, is you may have a target enrollment at the elementary level of, say, 750 students, but an existing school that may have been built in the 50s or 60s, maybe even 70s, may actually have an existing capacity of, let's say, 550 students or something of that nature. So in other words, there's a delta of 200 students between the actual existing capacity and the stated target capacity as outlined in the ed spec. Is that sort of the comparison? Am I correct in understanding that?
That's exactly right. And
yeah.
And my thought is that many of the elementary schools are under that 70.
Yeah, exactly. So again, each update of the long range facility plan is coming out of, and is actually, it makes sense to do these periodic updates of long range facility plans, even if the state didn't require them, but the state does require them, because the different planning parameters or criteria are being adjusted, as I mentioned before, over the long life of a district. And so that really kind of creates a situation where it makes sense to update this living document, which is the long-range facility plan. As districts begin, and it's not simply Beaverton School District, it's many, many districts that we've worked with, as they begin to establish or adjust target capacities for schools in their ed specs, then each phase that is undertaken associated with a long-range facility plan update has an opportunity to ask the question first, whether or not any of the existing schools merit modification or replacement towards that target. And there are a number of factors that really need to come into place before that would actually become implemented. Those factors are associated with facility condition, over enrollment in a given boundary area that says, hey, we should really increase the size of the school towards our target, that would allow those things to happen. And so the replacement of these schools, if you're in a district that has a lot of schools that are well under the target capacity, every time you do a long-range plan and a capital measure, it's an opportunity to assess that and begin to move toward that target incrementally. And so over time, it could very well mean that for certain districts, the number of boundary areas that they have and have to maintain in a given district start to reduce, because the capacity of their district starts to be accomplished in fewer facilities. But again, it has to be driven by data really, and making sure that that data supports increasing capacity at a given school.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I should state too, one thing it's, I think, important to note, and I don't want to step beyond my bounds here because this is really a teaching and learning sort of question, but typically speaking, one of the core considerations when districts are developing target capacities and an associated ed spec are really what they believe as a district represents the size of a school that is both efficient in operation, but also able to provide a robust curriculum. And so for many districts that have a large number of very small elementary schools, while those can be very nice from the standpoint of a neighborhood school and very valuable from that standpoint, they sometimes aren't able to deliver the robust type of curriculum opportunities for a large number of schools that have not very many students in each school. So music programs and those sorts of things. And so sometimes those decisions, sometimes tough decisions, are used to establish the kind of quote unquote ideal school size for a given district. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? If not, we can move to our little mini poll section. So we have for you 6 questions. And why don't we move to the first question, and then I'll give you some instructions on how we would like to receive your input on these questions. So what we would like you to do is we would like you to type your answer to each of these questions using the chat feature. So go into chat. And the way we'd like you to answer it is for each question. So in this instance, begin by just typing in the number of the question. So you'll type in number 1, just 1. And then after you've identified the question you're answering by typing the number in, go ahead and provide your answer. And this is really a 2-part question. Should the district consider implementing the next phase of the long-range facility plan by proposing a capital measure in 2021, or it could be also early 2022. So you might sort of adjust that to the not too distant future, near future. And if so, why do you think that the district should do that? And if not, if you say, no, I don't think so, please tell us why you don't think they should do that. And we'll give you about 4 minutes or so to answer this question. And I'll give you about a 30-second warning before we move on to the next question. Looks like we have about half of our responses so far. Okay, about 30 seconds or so until we move to the next question. Okay, why don't we move on to the second question? So again, type in the number 2 prior to providing your answer. And for, I guess, for those of you who felt that it would make sense to consider a capital measure, which of the 2 plans presented would you support and why? The $325 million option 1, which requires no tax rate increase, or option 2 at 722 million, similar to the previous bond, which would be a 25-cent per thousand increase. Looks like we have about half of the attendees. Okay, we'll give it about another 30 seconds. Okay, why don't we move on to question 3? So please type in the number 3 first. And when you look at the plan line items that have been identified based on your understanding of the need we've presented and any other need that you may know of in the district, do you see anything that is missing from these plan proposals? And if you don't see anything that strikes you as missing, you can simply say no. Hang in there, guys. We're halfway through the questions. So keep pushing through. Okay, we'll give it about another 30 seconds. As you're typing this, I'll let you know that the plan is for to take your input back to the broader planning group, and we will be discussing any comments or suggestions you're making, and potentially incorporating some adjustments into the plan if they make sense after broader conversation. Okay, let's move on to the 4th question. So please type in the number 4 first. And this time it's the flip side of the previous question is, when you look at these plans, do you see anything in the proposals that should not be included? And that could be simply because from your viewpoint, there isn't enough need in one of the given line items, or perhaps there is a political and or support reason to not include a particular line item for some reason. So whatever the reason may be, or is there something that is proposed that should not be included? Okay, we'll give this about 30 more seconds. Some good comments here. Okay, so let's move on to the fifth question, 5 out of 6. Please type in number 5. And for this particular question, what we would like you to do is look at all of the various line items, some of which have been combined, that have been included in the proposals. And we'd like you, after you type in 5, to pick your top 3 in order that are most important to you in your opinion. So for example, if you believe Beaverton High School replacement is the most important or top priority, you would type in the number 5, then D, followed by the letter of your next priority. If it were technology, it would be H. So the top 3. We'll give it about another 30 seconds. Okay, let's move on to question 6, the last question. This question is really to get just some basic demographic information from you. And what we're looking at, two-part question, is what school or schools or community are you most closely affiliated with in the district? And then the second part of it is, what is your relationship to the district? Are you a current parent, or have you had children in the district previously and are no longer having children in the district, or an interested community member that may not have had children in the district? This helps us sort of understand your perspective and your answers to the questions. Okay, we'll give that another 30. I think we have almost everybody. Another 30 seconds. Okay. So the last slide, please, I think. All right, that's the final question. And with that, we'd like to kind of let you know what our next steps are. We will be getting together after these public open houses to meet as a planning team. We'll be going through all of the input that we've received from each of the sessions with community group or community members. And we'll be looking for opportunities to potentially incorporate any input that has been provided and potentially make adjustments here and there to the plan proposals that have been presented. After that, we will take this information to the focus group that we have been working with, the 12-person focus group, both to share the input that we have received from you and to incorporate any additional comments they may have. A draft plan proposal, a report will be written and submitted to the district for review and comment, at which point it will be made a final document, submitted to the superintendent for consideration, and then the superintendent may offer recommendations or submit that to the board for consideration and approval. And then at some point at time, the district may or may not opt to move forward with a capital measure that would be generally based on the outline provided for the long-range plans. So this is definitely still a work in progress. There are some evolution that still needs to happen. We would like to, again, thank you very much for the time that you have taken out of your busy lives to come to this meeting and provide input. We have one more public meeting tomorrow evening, starting at 6 o'clock from 6 to 8. If any of you feel so inclined to attend again, you are certainly welcome to do that. We would also encourage you, if you thought that this presentation was useful and informative, and particularly if you feel that it's a good conduit to provide some input, to encourage your neighbors and friends and other people you know associated with the school district to attend tomorrow's meeting, again, starting at 6, and they can do that by reaching out to the district similarly to the way you did, to participate in that meeting. And we would very much appreciate that. The more people we can get involved in this, the better, and the better the plan will be. So thank you very much. Stephen, would you like to say any closing comments?
I would just like to add that on behalf of Superintendent Grotting, on behalf of the school board, and certainly on behalf of the panelists here this afternoon, thank you very much for being here. Your comments are most welcome, and your questions as well. So thanks again. Appreciate you taking the time away from a sunny afternoon to spend it with us. So thanks again. And I would just ask that our panelists hang on for a minute, and we are now done.